Live from New Delhi, you're watching DD India News Hour, India's voice to the world. I'm Mark Lynn. Namaskar. Coming up in the next hour. Amid calls for ceasefire in West Asia, Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu to address the UN General Assembly today. India continues to receive support for the UN Security Council permanent seat during the general debate. Japan's ruling Liberal Democratic Party chooses Shigeru Ishiba, a veteran partyman, as its next leader and Prime Minister. The general elections are due in October 2025. The Kanpur cricket test makes a late start. India puts Bangladesh in to bat. Amid overcast conditions, Bangladesh weathers Akashdeep storm. As the conflict between Israel and Lebanon rages on, there are signs of potential ceasefire talks, and these are in the coming days. Israel has hinted at possible progress in negotiations while international efforts continue to push for a truce. Here's the latest in the ongoing situation.
Amidst Israel and Lebanon conflict, Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu has hinted at a possible ceasefire with Lebanon in the coming days. On Friday, Netanyahu confirmed that Israeli teams had engaged in discussions about US ceasefire proposals with Lebanon, with further talks scheduled. He expressed appreciation for US efforts in facilitating these negotiations. In a statement, he said, "Our teams met to discuss the US initiative and how we can advance the shared goal of returning people safely to their homes. We will continue those discussions in coming days." However, earlier, Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu on Thursday had asked the Israeli troops to continue fighting with full force in Lebanon. Israeli Foreign Minister Israel Katz too said there would be no ceasefire in the north, where Israeli jets have been carrying out the heaviest bombardment against the Iranian-backed Hezbollah movement in decades. Meanwhile, Lebanon's Foreign Minister Abdullah Abu Habib renewed his call for a ceasefire between Israel and Hezbollah. On Thursday, he warned that Lebanon is facing a crisis that threatens its very existence as the conflict escalates.
And we reiterate today our call for a ceasefire on all fronts so that it will be an opportunity and a prerequisite towards the full-fledged implementation of Resolution 1701 of the United Nations Security Council, which has been effective in establishing a relative degree of stability in the south of Lebanon since the end of the July War of 2006, up until 7th October 2023.
On the international stage, ceasefire negotiations are gaining momentum. The US and France are pushing for a 21-day truce, with talks continuing on the sidelines of a United Nations meeting in New York. Canada has also joined calls for an immediate ceasefire, adding to growing international pressure.
The escalation of tensions that we see today is devastating. We demand that all parties do what is possible to protect the civilian population and to allow humanitarian aid to reach those who need it. I'll be clear, we must reach a ceasefire now.
On the ground, tensions remain high. Israeli forces successfully targeted the head of Hezbollah's Air Force unit after a strike in southern Beirut suburb. Additionally, Israeli soldiers arrived in the northern town of Naharia on Thursday as the army deployed 2 reserve brigades to reinforce the region. Bureau Report, DD India.
Well, Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu will address the UN General Assembly along with family members of the hostages who were kidnapped by Hamas and held in Gaza on Friday. Netanyahu's speech is expected to focus on the ongoing conflicts in Gaza and Lebanon and the future trajectory of the two amid growing international pressure on Israel to strike a ceasefire deal with both Hamas and Hezbollah. India's External Affairs Minister Jaishankar on Thursday met the United Nations Secretary General Antonio Guterres. During this meeting, talks focused on the Pact of the Future, reforming multilateralism, artificial intelligence, climate action, concerns in West Asia and Ukraine. Dr. Jaishankar also met the new president of the United Nations General Assembly, Philemon Yang, on the sidelines of the UNGA and reaffirmed India's commitment to the recently adopted Summit of the Future Pact. Sharing a post on social media, Dr. Jaishankar wrote, and I quote, "Pleased to meet the new UNGA president, Philemon Yang, in New York, assured him of India's full support to his vision of unity and diversity, peace, human sustainability and dignity for everyone, everywhere." Dr. Jaishankar is in the United Nations, in fact, at the United States, and he's attending the 79th session of the United Nations General Assembly. The External Affairs Minister, Jaishankar, underscored the significance of BRICS for multipolarity and global diversity. Speaking at the BRICS Foreign Ministers meeting on the sidelines of the UNGA, Dr. Jaishankar emphasized the need to reform multilateralism and strengthen development. Dr. Jaishankar also stressed about achieving Sustainable Development Goal targets during the BRICS meeting. The discussions focused on overcoming poverty, addressing debt, and promoting fair trade. India has stressed on the need for urgent reforms to make the United Nations Security Council more representative, efficient, democratic, and accountable. Speaking at the UNSC Open Debate on Leadership for Peace, Tanmay Lal, who is the Secretary West in the Ministry of External Affairs, also said that the world is grappling with devastating armed conflicts and the current multilateral response is inadequate, failing to prevent or resolve these conflicts.
Serious armed conflicts are impacting lives, economies, and societies across geographies in our interconnected world. The current multilateral response is falling seriously short in ending and preventing such conflicts. Also in tackling unrelenting threats from terrorism, new and emerging technologies, transnational organized crime, and in ensuring maritime security. The UN Security Council has to become representative, transparent, efficient, effective, democratic, and accountable.
India's bid for a permanent UNSC seat is getting more endorsements. Besides Russia, world leaders including UK Prime Minister Keir Starmer, Portugal's Prime Minister Luis Montenegro, they joined the French President Emmanuel Macron's bid for India's permanent candidature in the UNSC, in line with the External Affairs Minister Jaishankar's standpoint at the United Nations on UN reforms. Now, it may be recalled that only 5 countries, that's the United States, China, Russia, and France, and the UK have permanent seats at the UNSC. Let's look at this report.
The need for reform of the United Nations, especially United Nations Security Council, has long been felt as to effectively address its functioning in the contemporary world order. In fact, during the recently held Summit of the Future at the United Nations in New York, India's Prime Minister called for urgent reform of the institutions of global governance, including the UN Security Council.
Success of humanity lies in our collective strength, not in the battlefield. और वैश्विक शांति एवं विकास के लिए ग्लोबल संस्थाओं में रिफॉर्म्स आवश्यक है. Reform is the key to relevance.
India's External Affairs Minister Dr. S. Jaishankar also echoed the same sentiment of reforming the United Nations and giving representation to Asia, Africa and Latin America, as well as Global South in the UNSC.
Expansion and proper representation in the permanent category is a particular imperative. Asia, Africa and Latin America, the Global South, cannot continue to be shortchanged. They must be given their legitimate voice. Real change needs to happen and happen fast.
India's bid for permanent seat at the UNSC has been supported by France at the UNGA session.
France, as I reiterate here, is in favour of the Security Council being expanded. Germany, Japan, India, Brazil should be permanent members.
The current structure of the United Nations Security Council is confined to just 5 permanent members which have veto powers. These are United States, China, France, Russia and the United Kingdom. Presently, India has the support for its bid to be permanently represented in UNSC from the following countries. So by and large, India's stature in the world has been recognized by all the important organizations, and its bid for permanent membership of United Nations Security Council has been backed by a majority of countries, and it is only a matter of time when India's quest for an equitable, just rules-based international order with a voice of Global South, Africa, Asia and Latin America will be heard in the highest echelons of the world body. Bureau Report, DD India.
And for a deeper analysis on the UNSC and the need for reform, we have with us seasoned diplomat, Ambassador Prabhu Dayal, former senior diplomat. Ambassador Dayal, what success has the UNSC had in preventing war? There are 2 currently in the world, and the UNSC seems to be powerless.
Well, Mark, first of all, thanks for having me on your show. I may mention that the UN Secretary General, Antonio Guterres, himself recently said that the UN is outdated, particularly the UNSC, and he warned that it will lose credibility because it is not being able to tackle global crisis and security-related situations. He made a very telling remark when he said that we can't build a future for our grandchildren with a system built for our grandparents. So there is a need for reforming the UN Security Council and making it more capable of addressing the problems on account of the escalating global conflicts and security challenges effectively. Now, I was listening to your news broadcast, and you very rightly pointed out that India has long sought a seat, a permanent seat on the UN Security Council to better represent the interests of developing nations and the geopolitical realities of the current world order. Now, the UNSC was set up 8 decades ago,
yes,
when many countries, including India, were colonies. So it doesn't reflect present-day realities. And I'm happy that India's candidature for a permanent membership of the UN Security Council is getting a support from a wide range of countries, including 4 of the permanent members. Recently, as you said, the UK Prime Minister, while speaking at the UN, supported India's case, as also the French President. Recently, President Biden lent his support. Russia has repeatedly supported India's case. The problem only remains China.
Indeed, Ambassador Dayal, you did mention the UK, France, Russia and the US reaffirming their support for India's permanent bid. But, how much weight does this have if each of these powers have veto powers and China has the veto power?
Article 108 of the UN Charter outlines the process for amending the Charter itself. And it says that, of course, the General Assembly must approve the reforms by a 2/3 majority. The amended Charter then must be having the support of all the 5 permanent members of the UN Security Council. And China is a permanent member. China has a veto power, and China has repeatedly spoken against the need for UNSC reform. It wants to keep others out. In particular, India's case is not at all acceptable to China. China sees us as its enemy. China wants to maintain global dominance, and in Asia, it wants to be the only power that matters. And if India gets a permanent seat on the UN Security Council, China feels that its case will be
diluted
will
a
come
bit.
down. It'll be weakened. So it plays a very negative role, and this is possible because of the UN Charter itself.
Okay, Ambassador Dayal, also, there are other ambitions. Let me quote William Ruto, the Kenyan president, and he says, and I quote, an institution that excludes 54 African countries with 1.4 billion people while allowing one nation to veto decisions of the remaining 193 member states in the 21st century is simply unacceptable. And I'll also, give you the view of Alexander Vucic, who is the president of Serbia. He talks about another dilemma. He says that we are neither servants of Russia or the United States of America. We have our own politics and our own interests. What do you have to say?
Well, there are many forces which are trying to see that the UN Security Council is reformed in the manner in which they want it to be. There are interests involved. The G4 has been a very powerful factor in this regard, and it comprises Germany, Japan, India, and Brazil, which are countries which have support of a wide range of countries. Now, the UN reform of the Charter to admit new members to the Security Council has to have the support of the P5, each one of the P5. Now, if India is getting the support of 4 of the P5 members, then certainly it needs to be seen by a whole host of other countries, including African countries, that India has support, and India has repeatedly proven its credentials that it will help the countries of the global south. So if African countries want a better United Nations, if countries like Serbia want a better United Nations, then they have to realize that India's presence as a permanent member of the UN Security Council will be to their benefit. It will be to their advantage. So that is why more and more countries are coming forward and supporting India's case.
Also, let's look at South America as a continent. Brazil is hoping to be a permanent member. But the Argentinian president had this to say, and I quote, we have reached a situation where the Security Council, which is the most important body, has become distorted because the veto of its permanent members used for particular interests of some. An organization that's powerless to provide solutions to real global conflicts, and he goes on to mention the conflicts. But the issue is about the veto power. Should the permanent members actually have this veto power at all?
Well, the veto power has been misused by several of the P5 members on a number of occasions. But the problem is that it's impossible to take it away from them, because, as I said, the UN Charter can only be done with their support, and none of the P5 members will be in favor of the veto power being snatched away from them. So they will veto any suggestion to take away the veto power. That's the problem. This is the way the UN Security Council was set up. And although it's a faulty structure, but the problem is how to reform and amend this faulty structure.
All right. We'll leave it there. Thank you very much, Ambassador Prabhu Dayal, for throwing light on the situation. And of course, reforms is a slow process, but we are chipping away at it. Now, still to come on DD India News Hour, the World Bank commits to support Sri Lanka's economic recovery. Hurricane Helene, which is a Category 4 storm, has hit Florida in the United States. It's one of the fiercest storms in the country's history.
Global warming and climate change are political and ethical issues. They're issues of rights, of equality, and of justice. Let's take a look at some of these questions that surround the idea of climate justice.
We have to move to green energy, which is solar and wind and all others. And therefore, we cannot have such a large area for conservation of the GIB.
Art doesn't sort of hit you on the head and sort of make you feel defensive. It proposes, and then the viewer can take away an idea, thought, and hopefully act on it to make a bit of a difference.
They had a show called Shubh Kal, and it was one of their oldest radio programs. So I used that show as my platform and started to work on creating content around climate change for this particular show.
You're watching DD India News Hour. I'm Mark Lin. Now, in one of the most unpredictable elections, the former Defense Minister of Japan, Shigeru Ishiba, is now set to replace Fumio Kishida as the next Prime Minister of the country. He will be taking over at a time when the ruling Liberal Democratic Party is marred by a series of crises impacting its ratings. The 67-year-old politician had joined the parliament in 1986 after a short stint as a banker. Now, Ishiba's approach to diplomacy, including his connections with the United States, rising costs of living in Japan, the unstable regional situations around it, these are all going to be watched closely. News from Myanmar, and Myanmar's ruling military made an unexpected outreach on Thursday, urging its armed opponents to abandon terrorism and participate in the general election next year. The call, in fact, it comes as the military battles a civil war against the People's Defense Forces and ethnic minority rebel groups. This marks the military's first olive branch since the 2021 coup, despite its previous refusal to engage in dialogue with groups it labels as terrorists. However, Myanmar's shadow national unity government quickly rejected the offer, refusing to disband its armed affiliates or end their rebellion. News from another neighbor of India, Sri Lanka, and the World Bank has expressed commitment towards supporting Sri Lanka's economic recovery and development. In a letter addressed to Sri Lanka's newly elected president, Anura Kumara Dissanayake, the World Bank recognized that the country's economic reset requires the state's continued attention, and added that opportunities for growth, prosperity and development are equally significant. Earlier this week, the managing director of the International Monetary Fund, Kristalina Georgieva, had said that the IMF is looking forward to working with Sri Lanka's new elected president, President Dissanayake. In fact, Dissanayake had said that his government will initiate discussions with the IMF immediately to take forward the ongoing program and conclude a deal with its external debtors, external creditors for debt relief. Our correspondent Dr. Ahmed Muin Farooqi joins us now from Colombo. Dr. Farooqi, tell us more about the World Bank and the IMF's commitments to help Sri Lanka and how they're going to continue.
Good afternoon, Mark. Primarily speaking, yes, Sri Lanka, it witnessed an economic meltdown in 2022. Thereafter, India had come to the rescue of the island nation. And later on, in 2022, when the then President Gotabaya Rajapaksa had fled the country and resigned, thereafter, Ranil Wickremesinghe was elected by the parliament as the president for the remainder of the term. Under President Wickremesinghe, Sri Lanka had secured an IMF deal. Now, currently speaking, World Bank and IMF saying that they would work with the President Anura Kumara Dissanayake towards economic recovery of Sri Lanka. It's a positive step towards the recovery of the country, as well as if you have to look into the IMF deal itself. The deal was, the agreement was reached last year in 2023 in March. And thereafter, there have been two reviews already, two tranches of the $2.9 billion extended fund facility were already made available to Sri Lanka. Now, as the island has shifted towards a new government with President Dissanayake at the helm, there was, some amount of concern with regard to if the IMF agreement will go ahead. In a televised address just day before yesterday, President Dissanayake, he addressed the entire nation, and he said that economic stability is paramount, and the country, his government, would go ahead and initiate talks with IMF to continue the program. Probably there will also be certain discussions with regard to how much of austerity measures could be relaxed, but those details have not been disclosed yet. However, he has also talked about taking forward the steps towards closing the debt restructuring deal with the international sovereign bond holders. And this is in a positive direction because ultimately this will enable the country to have some debt relief going forwards, at least till 2028, till the time that is the moratorium which has been provided for by the bilateral creditors. And during this time, the new government will have sufficient time to see to it that its revenues are ramped up and it is in a better condition as compared to what it exists now.
Dr. Faruqi, as a leftist leader, he's hoping to bring about pro-people policies. What are the main priorities in that respect? I mean, I can understand that, when the IMF gives a loan, there will also be austerity measures involved.
Absolutely right, Mark. You see, Sri Lanka has traditionally had a free market with more so centrist to center-right kind of governments which had been in power. This is the first time a leftist government has been elected. However, yes, there are going to be certain relaxations in the austerity measures which are already in force. The IMF agreement had certain clauses with regard to increasing the income tax as well as the indirect taxes. Not just that, even bringing about cost-reflective strategies for various services that the government provides, like electricity, fuel, and thereabout. But now what the President Desanayake had said during the time when he was campaigning for his election was that he would relax certain of these austerity measures. Probably this would also require certain talks with the IMF. And this is where it gets a little interesting because there was a debt sustainability analysis done by the IMF in which certain parameters had been finalized.
Yes.
If these parameters are to be changed, then IMF will come in there and they will talk about, the going back on the deal itself. Now, this is something very, very critical, and this is where his opponents were criticizing him that no, it cannot be renegotiated, no, it cannot be relaxed in this particular manner. But now, with President Desanayake saying that the economic stability is the most paramount thing for Sri Lanka, he has now said that the IMF deal will continue. But we do not know how much exactly the relaxation will be there in terms of the austerity measures. Mark.
We'll leave it there. Thank you very much, Dr. Ahmed Muin Faruqi from Colombo. Now, moving on, the U.S. President Joe Biden and Vice President Kamala Harris, they've introduced new executive actions aimed at addressing gun violence in the United States. During a White House event, Biden signed an executive order focused on reducing the psychological impact of active shooter drills in schools and addressing the increased use of 3D printed devices that convert guns into automatic weapons. The announcement marks the one-year anniversary of the White House's Office of Gun Violence Prevention, which is led by Harris. Now, a task force has also been created to assess these threats, with a report expected in 90 days. The former U.S. President Donald Trump is set to meet Ukrainian President Zelensky on Friday at Trump Tower in New York. The Republican nominee's announcement followed Zelensky's events at the White House on Thursday. Trump's comments came after Zelensky wrote to Trump asking for a meeting to discuss Ukraine's pursuit of a just peace. Trump also raised the idea of making a deal with Iran aimed at ending hostilities if he is elected president. Earlier, the Ukrainian president held talks with the U.S. President Joe Biden at the White House on Thursday, and the U.S. president announced more than $8 billion in military assistance for Ukraine. The aid includes the first shipment of a precision-guided glide bomb. It's called the Joint Standoff Weapon, with a range of up to 130 kilometers. The medium-range missile gives Ukraine a major upgrade in its weapons that it's using to strike Russian forces, allowing the Ukrainians to do it at safer distances. Zelensky thanked Biden for the support.
I'm proud to announce a new $2.4 billion package of security assistance. I've also directed the Pentagon to allocate all the remaining security assistance funding that has been appropriated to Ukraine, period, by the end of my term, which is January 20.
We deeply appreciate that Ukraine and America have stood side by side from the very first moments of this terrible Russian invasion. Your determination is incredibly important for us to prevail.
Let's take a look at other stories making news around the world. The President of Cuba, Miguel Diaz-Canel, held meetings with his Vietnamese counterpart To Lam in Havana. 7 cooperation agreements were signed between the ministries and localities of the two countries on many issues. These include health and agriculture. And this was the first state visit of the Vietnamese president to Cuba. In a bid to control organized crime, the government of Peru has declared 60 days of emergency to 12 districts around Lima and neighboring Callao. And this is due to the recent driver strikes in that country, demanding stringent security measures after a driver was killed by criminals. In one of his rare trips to European countries, Pope Francis arrived in Belgium on Thursday after a day-long visit to Luxembourg. Earlier this month, he was on a 12-day-long visit to Southeast Asian countries, some of which marked historic visits by any pope after decades. And still to come here on DD India News Hour, India's Commerce Minister says that Make in India has made India the favoured investment destination. World Tourism Day is being observed with the theme Tourism and Peace. Geopolitics and trade deals. Economic challenges amid development. Hard work and the path to prosperity. It's the economy always. Between walkers, money is what money does and says. Supply creates its own demand. Between the bulls pulls and bears tears. When supply chains globalization and India rises to the podium. We'll get you centered with the Economic Brief at 8 p.m. every Thursday on DD India. You're watching DD India News Hour. I'm Mark Lynn. Here's a recap of our main stories. Amid calls for ceasefire in West Asia, Israeli Prime Minister Netanyahu to address the UN General Assembly today. India continues to receive support for a UN Security Council permanent seat during the general debate. Japan's ruling Liberal Democratic Party chooses Shigeru Ishiba, who's a veteran partyman, as the next leader and prime minister. The general elections are due in October 2025. Well, India's Commerce and Industry Minister Piyush Goyal marked a decade of the Make in India initiative, emphasizing restored investor confidence and job creation. In a post on X, the minister highlighted the success of Make in India initiative that was launched by Prime Minister Narendra Modi 10 years ago to reinvigorate job creation and stimulate economic growth. He mentioned further, Make in India mission has delivered results that make the country a favoured investment destination. The initiative is a roaring success that has made India the focus of global attention and curiosity. It has empowered businesses, especially medium and small and micro, small and medium enterprises, that's MSMEs, to produce high-quality goods. An example of this transformation is the toy manufacturing sector, which has seen a 239% jump in exports. The Make in India initiative has also helped local manufacturers and sellers who were earlier exposed to hazardous, low-quality imported toys. India's journey has been exciting and the future looks promising. The Startup India initiative leads to the creation of about 15 lakh jobs. That's 1.5 million jobs. That's what it is. Also, startups are not just creating jobs, they are also providing solutions to reduce food wastage, provide better health care, to empower women, to help farmers and improve sanitation. Additionally, he mentioned the production-linked incentive schemes, and they are transforming the country's manufacturing sector. The PLI schemes have attracted, and this is a large investment, 1.32 lakh crore rupees. Not able to translate that into dollars for you. It's a huge sum to significantly boost manufacturing output, and more than 8.5 lakh, or that's about 850,000 jobs have already been created directly and indirectly through this initiatives. India is now recognized as a key partner in high-tech and emerging technologies. Global companies are eager to invest in India, and India's infrastructure spending has increased substantially. As the world is celebrating Tourism Day on Friday, India held an event in the capital, New Delhi. The Vice President of India, Jagdeep Dhankar, was the chief guest at this celebration. He emphasized that tourism has a positive impact on the economic growth of the country. And in his address, also the Tourism and Culture Minister, Gajendra Singh Shekhawat, highlighted the massive reforms in tourism in the last decade under Prime Minister Narendra Modi's vision of tourism in India.
This is an event to celebrate the profound impact of tourism on global economic development, social progress and cultural exchange. So much has been changed in the ecosystem by affirmative governance, technological advancement, transparent, accountable mechanisms in place for every governmental dealings that the International Monetary Fund reflected. India is favorite global destination for investment and opportunity.
Tourism is the sector which connects us all and bridges out the gaps between the cultures and the nations. हमारे यशस्वी प्रधानमंत्री श्री नरेंद्र मोदी जी के विजन के साथ भारत ने पिछले 10 साल में अभूतपूर्व प्रगति की है और तेज गति के साथ में बढ़ते हुए आज भारत विश्व पटल में अपनी एक नई पहचान बना रहा है.
Well, World Tourism Day is being observed on September 27. It's done so every year, and the theme this year is Tourism for Tourism and Peace. It highlights tourism's vital role in fostering understanding between cultures and promoting global harmony. Tapas Bhattacharya reports.
World Tourism Day is celebrated annually on September 27th, raising global awareness of tourism's social, cultural, political and economic importance. Established by the World Tourism Organization in 1979, this day marks the anniversary of the adoption of the United Nations World Tourism Statutes in 1970. This year the theme is Tourism and Peace, highlighting the tourism's vital role in fostering understanding between cultures and promoting global harmony. As people travel and connect with diverse communities, barriers are broken and tolerance grows. Tourism contributes to peace by creating jobs, supporting local economies and encouraging sustainable practices. Governments around the world, including India, are working to enhance tourism's impact. The e-visa facility in India, allowing nationals from 167 countries to apply online with reduced fees, making travel more accessible.
Today, our airports, Delhi, Mumbai, Hyderabad, Bangalore, these are world-class airports. They are better than any airport in the world. So when a person lands, he's amazed to get the first impression.
The Swadesh Darshan scheme, which develops theme-based tourist circuit across the country. As of 2024, 73 projects have been completed.
What Modi ji has started, the religious movement. After the Ayodhya temple, India can become the spiritual destination of the world. We are the birthplace of 4 great religions, Hinduism, Buddhism, Sikhism and Jainism. And we can have, charters from all over the world on religious tourism.
The Swadesh Darshan 2.0, focusing on 57 destinations for integrated tourism development, and Prasar scheme, enhancing infrastructure at pilgrimage site, further support India's tourism growth. Tourism is more than travel. It's a path to understanding, connection, and lasting peace. Celebrate World Tourism Day and join the movement towards a more peaceful and sustainable future. With Campus and Vinod, this is Tapash Bhattacharya for GD India from Delhi.
India's Health and Family Welfare Secretary Apurva Chandra released the operational guideline and training manual on non-alcoholic fatty liver disease. Now, these guidelines will be beneficial for high-risk fatty liver patients. During that meeting, all states were connected virtually and they were urged to implement these guidelines. On this occasion, the Health Secretary stated that in India, 9 to 32% of the population suffers from non-alcoholic fatty liver disease, a large sum of people, now which is the cause of concern, and these guidelines will help in controlling the disease.
India has taken the lead in recognizing NAFLD, non-alcoholic fatty liver disease, as a major non-communicable disease. It is only one of the few countries that has done so. And the statistics which have been given, they are quite scary, because as Punya also mentioned, we never realize that a non-alcoholic person who doesn't drink can have fatty liver disease. Almost 9 to 32% of the Indian population can have non-alcoholic fatty liver disease. The numbers are huge. That means out of 10, 1 to 3 persons can have NAFLD. These revised guidelines and training module will provide a framework for all healthcare workers, and capacities will be developed to identify, manage and prevent NAFLD.
The United States is battling with severe climatic conditions. Hurricane Helene has made landfall in Florida, and the return of Storm John in Mexico. As the impact of climate change intensifies, there is need to address these issues collectively.
The adverse impacts of climate change continue to upend normal life across the globe. People in the US's state of Florida are facing catastrophic and unsurvivable conditions after Hurricane Helene made landfall in Florida's Big Bend region on Thursday late night. Wind speed of 225 kilometers per hour makes it one of the most powerful storms to hit the United States. The storm has caused power outage for over 1 million customers, affecting over 350,000 homes. As the storm intensified, torrential rain resulted in flooded roads in several areas and shut down airports across Florida. The hurricane has caused one fatality, more are feared. Officials have urged residents across Florida to take all initiatives to save themselves. The National Hurricane Center said that the powerful storm is capable of destroying buildings and carrying cars pushing inland.
We're here at the State Emergency Operations Center providing an update on Hurricane Helene. It is currently making landfall in Taylor County. In the Big Bend section of Florida, Deckle Beach. It is a Category 4 storm with maximum sustained winds of 140 miles per hour. It is moving northeast at 24 miles per hour. Hurricane force winds are extending up to 60 miles from the center of the storm, and tropical storm force winds are extending 300 miles from the center of the storm.
Numerous evacuations have been ordered along Florida's Gulf Coast. After making landfall across the coast, Helene is expected to move to Georgia on Friday and could bring 12 inches of rain. A state of emergency has been declared in 159 countries since Tuesday. In Mexico, threat of Hurricane John is back as it lashes its Pacific coast. Referred as a zombie, Hurricane John strengthened on Thursday. Winds of 121 km per hour moved northwest off the coast of Mexico's Michoacan state. Heavy rains lashed ports and tourist spots in southwest Mexico, impacting major cargo ports and temporarily shutting down local airports. The storm has already claimed at least 5 lives. The Meteorological Department has predicted catastrophic, life-threatening flash flooding and mudslides. Extreme weather events such as drought, wildfires and floods are expected to get worse in the following years as global temperatures continue to rise. Though many countries are trying to take measures to reduce global warming, but that is not enough till now. Bureau Report, DD India.
Well, still to come here on DD India News Hour. The 90-meter mark will come with time. That's what India's ace javelin thrower Neeraj Chopra says. And troubled Roma, they were held to a 1-1 draw by Athletic Bilbao.
Complex issues, hidden agendas, twists and turns, strategic games. We think all dots are linked. We just need to connect them. Join me every week as I connect the dots to unravel hidden designs in statecraft, mysteries, and decode issues that matter to you. Watch Connecting the Dots with me at these times on DD India.
You're watching DD India News Hour. I'm Mark Lynn. Well, economists have a pessimistic outlook for Germany, and there are concerns regarding the chemical major BASF, which is a case study, some say, for what can go wrong. Analysts have lowered their expectations for Europe's largest economy. Now, Lars Holter is with Deutsche Welle, and he joins me now from Berlin. Lars, what can you tell us about this latest report that we've just talked about?
Thanks for having me. Yes, it's definitely some bad news towards the end of the week here. Let me just quickly go through the numbers. For this year, economists are expecting the economy to decline by 0.1%, and that's compared to a previous estimate of 0.1% growth. Then, for the next 2 years, expectations are for very modest GDP growth of 0.8 and 1.3%. Again, that is both weaker than earlier projections. All that comes at a time when we're not seeing much activity here anyway. Last year, German GDP was down 0.3%, and many had hoped, well, expected a quicker way out of the doldrums. Instead, for this year, stagnation is really the most generous description of what we're actually seeing. Of course, this is not very surprising. We've been dealing with some economic issues all year long. Just this week, we've seen an escalation in the auto industry, and that's the country's strongest sector. There, the weakness comes from higher prices, low export numbers, growing competition from abroad. And it's a similar picture for many other companies and entire business sectors.
So, Lars, what do economists identify as the most important reasons behind this weakness?
Well, let's take a closer look. As I just said, higher energy costs are definitely one factor we might as well start with. Energy prices are higher, partially because Germany had used Russian gas to power its industry for too long. And with Russia's war in Ukraine, we're no longer getting this resource and had to hurry to find alternatives. It's something we just heard from a German chemical giant BASF too. No major company here uses more natural gas, and BASF isn't doing well, and they are looking desperately now to cut costs. But then we also have growing competition from China, which has been hurting German exporters. And I find this particularly interesting. The analysts are also partially blaming the German government. They say that the three-party coalition's long arguing over next year's budget and general political uncertainty have worried both corporations and households, and that it has only led to even lower spending and investing.
Lars Holter in Berlin, thanks very much. Now, time for the sports news, and for that we have Deepika with me. Over to you, Deepika.
Thanks and good afternoon, Mark. First, let's quickly get a few words, all the latest on the ongoing India versus Bangladesh second test match, which is taking place in Kanpur. The second test match between India and Bangladesh has been halted due to bad light in Kanpur and rains. In 35 overs, Bangladesh crossed the 100-run mark, losing 3 wickets. Akashdeep made early inroads with the ball, dismissing both Bangladesh openers early in the first session. Muminul Haq is nearing his 50, hitting 40 runs off 81 balls, while Najmul Hossain Shantu also hit crucial 31 runs in 57 balls before being dismissed by Ravichandran Ashwin. Earlier, Indian captain Rohit Sharma won the toss and opted to bowl first. Rohit named an unchanged team while Bangladesh made 2 changes in their squad. Bangladeshi all-rounder Shakib Al Hasan has announced his retirement plans on Thursday, just a day before second and final Kanpur. Shakib made an announcement that he wished to play his farewell test match at Mirpur against South Africa next month if Bangladesh Cricket Board assured him security. However, Bangladesh Cricket Board said that it cannot provide security for Shakib, saying that the board is not a security agency. The Cricket Board's comments have cast a shadow over Shakib Al Hasan's return to Bangladesh. Shakib's concerns for his safety stems from his political background. He was a member of the parliament during the previous government under former Prime Minister Sheikh Hasina. On to athletics now. Neeraj Chopra on Friday said that 90-meter mark is within his sight and feels it will come with time. Neeraj returned to India earlier this month after his silver medal triumph at the Paris Olympics and a remarkable Diamond League final performance. Neeraj injured himself in practice sessions and X-rays revealed a fracture in the 4th metacarpal of his left hand. The injury has forced him to remain on the sidelines for the remainder of this year. Now, after failing to retain his gold medal at Paris Olympics against his arch rival, Neeraj is not straight away targeting the Los Angeles Olympics. He is looking to take it step by step and prepare for one challenge at a time.
नहीं एल के लिए तो बहुत टाइम है, लेकिन हाँ अगर बात करें अगले साल की तो अगले साल वर्ल्ड चैंपियनशिप है तो उसकी तैयारी करेंगे, फिर कॉमनवेल्थ एशियन गेम्स आ जाएंगे उससे अगले साल, तो धीरे-धीरे सबकी तैयारी करेंगे अच्छे से.
At Europa League, troubled Roma were held to a 1-1 draw by Athletic Bilbao after conceding a late equalizer at Stadio Olimpico. Roma fans were furious with the club's recent decision to sack boss Daniel De Rossi, which is 4 games into the season. Rossi was an iconic figure during his time as a Giallorosso player. Given the unenviable task of replacing De Rossi, Ivan Juric inspired a 3-0 victory against Udinese last weekend, but he was denied a second successive victory. Artem put Roma in front after 32 minutes, but Aitor Paredes headed Bilbao's equalizer after Unai Nunes noted a cross goal in the 85th minute. Manchester United manager Erik ten Hag jumped to the defence of captain Bruno Fernandes after the midfielder's slow start to the season, saying it is only a matter of time before the Portugal international returns to his best. Fernandes has 1 assist and is yet to score in his campaign, and the playmaker has been criticised for his performances in the last 2 games in which United were held to draws by Crystal Palace and 20. Ten Hag was asked if the 30-year-old is fatigued after a grueling last season in which he played over 4,000 minutes for United before representing his country at Euro 2024. United have not beaten Spurs for 2 years in a fixture that has traditionally produced goals. Ten Hag said he expects an intense game against Sanjay Postecoglou's team, who also have 7 points and are 10th on goal difference. And Tottenham began their Europa League campaign with an impressive 3-0 victory over Karabakh, despite going down to 10 men on Thursday night. After a 35-minute delay to kick off at Tottenham Hotspur Stadium because of travel disruptions, the home side were dealt an early blow when defender Radu was shown a straight red card for bringing down Juninho in one-on-one as the Brazilian raced through on goal. Despite that, Brennan Johnson had the ball in the back on the net 5 minutes later when Karabakh were caught playing out from the back and Dominic Solanke placed into the path of the 23-year-old. Those were the top highlights of the hour from the world of sports. Back to you.
Thanks a lot, Deepika. And let's conclude. But, Batman, who's regarded as one of the best superheroes in the fictional world, he's been honored with his own star on the Hollywood Walk of Fame in Los Angeles. He becomes the first superhero beating all the others to the Walk of Fame star. Good for Batman.
Sure, of course, yeah.
Everybody look straight ahead, please. No, bro, Larry. How are you?
Well, that's all we have in this edition of DD India News Hour, but let's know your thoughts on the news of the day. And for those of you on the go, get the latest news and updates from India and across the world on the DD India mobile app. That app's available on both Android and iOS platforms. Scan the QR code, download it now. We'll be back with more news as it breaks here on DD India. I'm Mark Lynn, and with me is Deepika Mehto. From all of us here in Delhi, thank you very much for watching DD India News Hour. Namaskar.